Now, when it comes to fairies, elves, leprechauns, goblins, trolls, gremlins, we've heard of them all, right? Really? All of them? The homunculus is a small humanoid or very small human creature. Now, this creature was popular in the 16th century, as it is said to have been brought about not by birth, but by alchemists' creation practicing alchemy. However they came about, their fabulized existence under a different name has been terrorizing Guyana and its people for a long time. It is said that they can be kept out of mischief by capturing and putting in a sealed jar or bottle, sometimes found knocking about the shores of Guyana's famous sea wall. So if you find a sealed jar or bottle washed up on shore, wherever you are in the world, don't open it. Should you find yourself in contact with one, you better get it into a sealed jar or bottle pretty darn quick. Not impossible to do if you know what to feed it. Bananas and Milk, a story by Dalrymple. David was at a loss on how to comfort his father. Uncle Ronald had died quite suddenly, and now David's father was inconsolable at the passing of his older brother. All David knew at this point was that his father's older sister, Aunt Ruby, and his father himself had had a falling out with Uncle Ronald some years ago. David remembered that his father was angry over the fact that it was implied by some that both he and Aunt Ruby were jealous of Uncle Ronald's extreme wealth. Wealth David witnessed when he and his father went to secure the house and put out the bins for collection, now that Uncle Ronald was no longer there to do so. Strange. Rich and opulent house. Why does it have that rotting smell? David thought. Like gone off fruit. I don't want nothing from Ronnie. You hear me? I don't need that kind of money. I want nothing from my brother, not even in death, and I haven't these past few years, bellowed Aunt Ruby. She and her sons, Marlon and Neville, came to stay on the run-up to the funeral. Marlon and David were close in age, but also as friends. David put this down to the fact that he and his younger sister Juliet just never had anything in common, yet he loved her nonetheless. Well, it's official, Richard, David's mum announced to her husband post a phone conversation. We got to have the wake at Ronald's. The church hall is just not available. Me? I ain't going nowhere near that place, Aunt Ruby piped up and began reciting the Bible's 23rd Psalm. A loud and heavy conversation turned into a meeting, whereupon it was agreed that David, Marlon, and their siblings would remain at Uncle Ronald's after the funeral to clear up and lock up once the guests had left. Oh, Ruby, no need to get so dramatic, man, David's father said, turning to his sister and immediately wishing he had not. Richard, I gon' give you dramatic. They're not cheering anymore. Time all you knew. With those words, they all took a seat. Your Uncle Ronald was always impatient. Even as a child, wanted everything now. Never had time for a wife or children of his own, and joked that they would slow him down in his quest for greatness. Ruby, you can't prove this. Hush now, Davy's mother begged. Her words fell on deaf ears as Aunt Ruby went on to reveal the secret. About 10 years ago, Ronnie tried to go into business for himself with a friend. Mark Peters was his name. They failed almost to the point of bankruptcy. From what I understand, in the end, he and Mark decided to pool what little they had and import bespoke furniture from Guyana. The finest woods, green heart, purple heart, and such. Mark was an Englishman, but they were always back in Guyana. Each time they returned to the UK, they would argue about the events on their trip until Mark said he wanted out. Then, Mark died mysteriously and quite suddenly about 5 years back. Marlon and David caught each other's eye. Finally, Juliet spoke. Are you saying Uncle Ronald killed his friend? No, he didn't have to. David's father tried to switch the conversation. Ruby, let we talk something else, no? Aunt Ruby paid no attention, continuing with her story. He didn't have to, for the same reason he had no wife and no children. He had bigger responsibilities, and I saw the signs. Aunt Ruby got comfortable. It was exactly 5 years ago that I stopped talking to my own brother when I saw him in the supermarket car park. Hurrying he was, had no time for me. Then I saw what was in his boot. It was full of bananas and milk. That's when I knew Ronnie had a Baku. Baku? Really, Mum? That's just stories from the old country, said an exasperated Neville. David's parents looked down and uncomfortable. I think Ruby might be right. I saw the amount of bananas and milk he had at the house. Ronald tried to get your dad involved in business deals after Peter passed. He never seemed to mourn Peter and just got even more rich. But I don't get the bananas and milk reference, said Neville. Aunt Ruby leaned in. A Baku is a small, almost human-like creature. It will do whatever you want, give you what you desire, and as much as you desire. And all you have to do is become its master and feed it bananas and milk. You must make arrangements for it before you die, or hell will break loose. Juliet stood to her feet. That's it. I'm not going anywhere near Uncle Ronald's house. I don't blame you, girl, mumbled Aunt Ruby. That thing might still be in there, Auntie. Juliet was completely shook at the thought. Meanwhile, David's thoughts were working overtime. He finally spoke them out loud. Oh, it's in there, sis. Now I know why there was such a strong smell of rotting fruit. It's in there, and it's hungry, with no master to serve. We gotta catch it. Once it was decided that Juliet and Neville would stay behind with David's mum, Aunt Ruby began packing what Marlon described as her anti-Baku kit. She shuffled quickly into the kitchen and came out with large dustbin bags, a huge jar that had once contained homemade pepper sauce, now empty, all but for a very small amount in the bottom, 2 cartons of milk, and the remaining 3 bananas from the fruit bowl, plus her Bible. She looked at her son and nephew, who smirked. All you don't make fun. I'm going in, dressed in the armor of the Lord. As they entered Uncle Ronald's house, the vast space of luxury was swarming with flies. Although not completely dark out, the night sky was drawing in. They stood in the hallway. The Baku could have been anywhere. The house was cold and silent, all except the sound of faint singing coming from the kitchen. David and Marlon indicated with signs that Aunt Ruby and David's father should head there. The rotting smell was present, but most intense in the kitchen. Aunt Ruby had her open Bible in her hands, and David's father was holding a peeled banana. As they walked through the kitchen door, there, sat on the worktop, amongst old banana skins and empty milk cartons, was the Baku. Small, with large head and hands, stumpy legs and feet, the ugly creature looked at David's father, holding the banana. The Baku sang louder. Come give me milk and banana, and you will always be my master. I give you riches of gold and silk if you would feed me bananas and milk. Still singing, the creature jumped off the worktop and stopped to make inquiries. You're going to give me that, master? It asked, not taking its eyes off the banana. Out of fear, David's father threw it a piece. The Baku, greedy, ate it, licking its fat, ugly, thick-skinned fingers. Then it began to sing again. David's father threw it another piece in a trance-like state. Aunt Ruby noticed the Baku had her brother hypnotized and broke the trance, holding her Bible aloft. She and David's father began walking backwards so the Baku would follow into the hallway. Meanwhile, David and Marlon left a trail of milky bananas to the lounge door. Dad, just follow the trail, whispered David. I rebuke you in Jesus' name. I rebuke you in Jesus' name, Aunt Ruby chanted. The Baku, now angry, spoke. Master is who? You is me master. Is who she? It wanted the banana, but it was growing angry from Aunt Ruby's chants. That's it, Mum. Keep going. Nearly there. Yes, Uncle, said a terrified Marlon. The Baku ran this way and that, stomping on its fat little legs, licking up the trail, greedily wanting what David's father had in his hand and trying its best to get at Aunt Ruby. The trail of bananas and milk led directly into the large pepper sauce jar. The Baku was lapping milk, chomping bananas, and it did so straight into the jar. Marlon tipped the jar upright and David clamped its cork, sealing it shut. The Baku stopped eating to realize its fate. "Ah, master, my eyes, master." The pepper sauce remains were burning the Baku. It made noise in protest of its capture and struggled but grew exhausted in the jar from the pain of sore eyes and skin. "Quick, put that jar in this dustbin bag," Aunt Ruby instructed, and as she did, she held it wide open on the floor. Marlon tried to pick it up and found it too heavy. "That weight is the weight of pure evil," Aunt Ruby announced. David's father turned to his sister, hugged her and thanked her. They all stood in triumph, hugging and giving thanks until Marlon spoke. "So what now? What do we do with this thing?" David placed his hand on his cousin's shoulder. "Well, if Uncle Ronald could live with it in this lifetime, he certainly can in the next." Marlon's mouth dried, looking at David. "You don't mean, David?" "Yes, cuz. Looks like we're having a double funeral for the price of one." Bananas and Milk, a story, both written and read by Dalrymple. You have been listening to a spoken word production for SoFF Creations.